Hey, Dan Beagleman here. In this video, I'll show you some cool ideas for soloing using slurring techniques over major and minor scales. There are three slurring techniques that we can use on a guitar: hammer-ons, pull-offs, and trills. Now for slurring techniques, what happens is you will pick the first note, and then successive notes, whether it's one or more, will be made with your left hand. And you get a very legato type sound. Legato meaning very, very smooth. Staccato, for example, staccato is very, very short clipped. That's a staccato technique. Legato is so the notes last one into the other and very smooth sounding. So again, as I said, with these slurs, you pick the first note or you engage the string for the first note, and the rest are made with your left hand. So here's an example of a slur. If I play an F note on string 4 and then a G note, instead of picking it, I make it with my left hand. I just kind of smack my finger into it, and it's called a hammer-on because it's as if like you're hammering the note with your finger. Okay, so picking, hammer. And of course you could do that with any finger from 1 2, 1 3, 1 4, 2 3, 2 4, 3 4. Okay, you pick the first note and then you hammer on the next, and it could be one note or two notes or three notes. In other words, I can go or all made with the left hand. Now if hammer-ons are new to you, you need to develop a little bit of strength in your left hand. So some exercises you can do would be just like if you hit the, let's say on string 6 with your first finger, and then just, hammer on the second finger and go across all 6 strings and back. Then do the same thing with fingers 1 and 3. 1 and 4. 2 and 3, 2 and 4, and 3 and 4. A little bit harder with 3 and 4. That's the idea if you want to build up some strength in your left hand for these hammer-on techniques. The second type of a slur is kind of like the reverse of a hammer-on. It's called a pull-off. Let's say I want to do a pull-off on string 1 from an A note to a G note. Here's an A note, here's a G note. I hold both fingers down, pick the string, pick the A note, and then instead of picking the G note, I'm going to kind of use my third finger and kind of pull it down, pulling it off the string to engage that G note, like that. And you could do that, of course, any of these 6 strings. Like that, okay? And of course any fingers, or okay? Hammer on, pull off. Just the opposite. And if you do it in succession quickly, the third type of slur is a trill. So again, if you notice my right hand, I only pick the string one time to engage the string to start the note, and then everything else is made by my left hand. You can do it with open strings, of course. Okay, 3 types of slurs: hammer-on, pull-off, trill. Now I'll take a C major scale and I'll play it slurring across the fingerboard. I'm going to play a pattern that's going to use 3 notes per string. So first I'm going to pick every note. C major scale, do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, no sharps and no flats. And again, 3 notes per string. So my lowest note is C, or the root note. My highest note is F, which is the 4th. So I'm covering 2 octaves and then a partial 3rd octave. Okay. Now, if instead of picking all those notes, I'm just going to pick the first note on each string, and I'll do 2 hammer-ons because, as I said, 3 notes per string, I'm only picking the first one. if I do pull-offs, when you do the hammer-ons, you start with your first finger, and then you want to hold that first finger down when you hammer on the second finger and the pinky. So you start holding this first finger down, and then as you add the other fingers, don't pull your first finger off the neck. You want to keep that on, hammer, keep that on, and when you get to the third note, you're actually pressing all three strings. You want to keep that down for a sustain. You want to hold all those three fingers down for good left hand positioning. When you do the pull-offs, you want to hold all three fingers down at the same time. So if I'm going to be going 4-3-1 on my fingers, hold those three fingers down. So you engage the string with the pinky, snap the pinky down to make the note with the third finger, and then snap the third finger down, and you have if you want to do it in succession like that, almost like a 3-note trill. Okay? Now, to take this a little further, you can do some interesting things with this by interpolating the notes. Engage the string, then I'm going to hammer my pinky, pull off the pinky, and then hammer the second and fourth finger. I'm going to play a series of 5 notes. First finger, pinky, first finger, second finger, pinky. Okay? If I pick them all, they sound like this. If I do the slurring technique, I'm going to pick the first note, C, hammer that pinky, pull off, back to the first finger, hammer the second finger, hammer the pinky. So I have this. Slowly, fast. Okay? And if I apply that idea now to the next string, and then across all 6 strings, slowly, and a little faster. Sounds very, very smooth. Again, using the word legato, very, very smooth sounding, So you pick the first note, and then the next 4 notes are being made by either using hammer-ons or pull-offs. And you can even mix the strings up. In other words, let's say if I did string 6 and then string 4, 5 and 3, 4 and 2, 3 and 1. So you can have a lot of different patterns, coming out from this. But again, the idea is that it's a very, very legato, very smooth sounding type of a pattern. Here again is this pattern. If I pick it, and if I play it legato style or with slurs, very, very smooth sounding. Now I'll take that same idea and I'll just apply it to 1 octave using 3 strings. I'll be doing 4 sets of using 3 strings. In other words, I'm going to play an octave pattern like that on strings 6, 5, and 4. And what I'm doing here is I'm going to pick the very last note just to give a little bit more of an edge because it's ending a phrase. In other words, if I pick these notes, it would be... Right? So I'm just going to pick the first one and the last one only. Right? And play it a little faster. Okay? That's using strings 6, 5, and 4. Now if I want, I could do the same thing on strings 5, 4, and 3. Same exact fingering, just starting on a C note here. Okay, if I want to start the same thing on strings 4, 3, and 2, I'll find my C note on string 4 here, and now I'll be an octave higher than I just was for those 2. When I do this pattern on strings 4, 3, and 2, when I get to string 2, I have to actually go 1 fret higher with my left hand because I have to compensate for, when you tune your guitar, the third and second string are tuned in thirds, where the other strings are tuned in fourths. So you have to compensate for that by going 1 fret higher to string 2. So anyway, here's that pattern using strings 4, 3, and 2. Okay, and if I do the same thing starting with string 3, I can play that octave pattern, strings 3, 2, and 1. Here's all 4 patterns playing the C major scale, legato style, or with slurs. Strings 6, 5, and 4. Strings 5, 4, and 3. Strings 4, 3, and 2. Strings 3, 2, and 1. So again, very, very legato sounding, very smooth. When played at high tempo, these things sound very, very cool. Okay, and you can extend them. Of course, there's many, many fingering patterns that you can use across the board. Okay, what I just did there was just finding 3 notes on each string that retain the notes in the C scale, all natural notes. So as I just showed you some patterns using the C major scale with slurs, legato style, I'll show you now the same thing using C minor scale. Here's a C minor scale in the 8th position, and again, I'm going to play it as I did with the major scale, 3 notes per string. Again, it starts on the low root note C. The highest note is F, which is the 4th. So I'm getting 2 octaves and a partial 3rd octave. And now showing you that same pattern that I did before with the major scale, where I play 5 notes per string. And if I play it legato style, slurred. And again, what I'm doing is I'm picking the first note and then 4 more notes on that string. Okay, very, very smooth sounding, very cool. Here's again also, as I showed you, the 4 patterns for the octave scale, using 6, 5, 4, 5, 4, 3, 4, 3, 2, 3, 2, 1. And again, I'm going to pick the first note, and I'm going to pick the last note in this case. Kind of feels like it, like dotting the end of the sentence. It gives a nice little, end to the phrase. Same thing on strings 5, 4, and 3. Same thing on strings 4, 3, and 2. And strings 3, 2, and 1. And you can mix these things up, as I said before, like with the major scale. You can, do alternate strings, 6 and 4, 5 and 3, 4 and 2. Now, I mentioned earlier that there are 3 types of slurs: hammer-ons, pull-offs, and trills. There actually is a 4th slur that I should mention, and those are called glissandos, or gliss for short. That's where you hit a note and then slide your finger to another note. For example, if I hit a G note on string 2 and then slide to this D note, okay, I'm picking the first note but keeping my finger on the string and sliding quickly. If I go slowly, it has an effect to it. As there might be a time when you want to do something like that, with like a chromatic slide down. But if I just want to go from one to another quickly, or right, if you're using some overdrive distortion like I am here, the note will last a lot longer, or a compressor or something like that. But that's the general idea. Hit a note and just slide to another one, whether you're going down, descending, or ascending, going higher. And the reason I separated this when I said about 3 slurs before there actually being 4 is because the other 3 slurs are a technique where you're engaging more than one finger of your left hand, whether you're doing a hammer-on, a pull-off, or a trill, right? This is using just one finger, engage the string with your pick, or if you play with your fingers, and just, again, take that one finger and slide down to it. So again, in total, I should say that there are 4 slurs that you want to be aware of: hammer-ons, pull-offs, trills, and glissandos, or gliss for short. Now, to get the most out of using these slurring techniques for soloing, playing fills, ideas, maybe for composition, whatever, you want to know the fingerboard, meaning you want to know the notes on the fingerboard, and then that would take you to knowing the notes in the scales, because you want to think about what key you're playing in, or what chord or chord cycle that you're playing over. So, let's say I'm in the key of C. I'm using a C major scale. Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. I want to know those notes all over the fingerboard. And the key of C has no sharps and no flats, all natural notes, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. By seeing them across the fingerboard in all the different areas, you can really get some very fluid sounding playing by mixing up these different types of slurs. In other words, the first 3 slurs, the hammer-ons, the pull-offs, and the trills, all take place kind of in one area for the moment, right? But if I use glissandos to slide me into another position, for example, now I can dance around. I love that expression, dance around the fingerboard. And basically what I'm doing is I'm just kind of freelancing around, free-form playing, using these different slurring techniques, and using glissandos to get me to make big jumps on the fingerboard. When I showed you the patterns before, as for example, the C major scale played legato, I'm kind of staying in one area of the fingerboard, right now, just kind of position 8, and 9. But by using the glissandos, I can play some kind of flurry of notes. Right? So I can, again, use the glissando to take me a big jump position-wise without lifting my hand off the string. In other words, if I go... right? Nothing wrong with that. It sounds a lot nicer and a lot more fluid when you use the glissandos to make big leaps in the fingerboard without having any break in the notes that you're playing. Right? It's a lot more fluid sounding, and again, using glissandos to make a nice smooth transition from one area of the fingerboard to another. But again, what I'm doing here, what I just said earlier about knowing the notes in the scales, I'm seeing C scale or notes in the C scale all over the fingerboard. So what you might want to do is study, if you're not aware of them, many different patterns for major scales in different areas of the fingerboard. See, so if I just pop my hand here in position 10, I have a C scale pattern. I see the notes in the C scale right here, or in position 7, or in position 5, or 3, or 1, or 15, or 17. And again, like I said, if you really don't have that fingerboard knowledge down, I would recommend that you spend some time studying major scale patterns across the fingerboard. On my channel, there's a playlist called Modes and Scales, and there are many videos on modes and the scales in different patterns for playing major and minor scales, all types of minor scales, harmonic, natural minor, melodic minor, and all 7 modes. And by having, as I said, the fingerboard knowledge, you could see this across the board. It'll really open the fingerboard up to you. Let's say I'm playing something in E major. If I could see, here's an E major scale over here. Right, this is my E major scale. Right, so you can just, as I said, dance around the fingerboard, because again, what I'm doing is I'm just seeing all the notes in that particular scale that I'm dealing with, and then applying these 4 different types of patterns. Right? Again, dancing around the fingerboard, using these 4 different types of slur patterns and just seeing the notes in the scale that I'm dealing with, E major scale, and I'm just dealing with that. Let's say I'm playing something with E minor, then I just need to know what an E minor scale is all over the fingerboard. An E minor scale has all natural notes except it has an F sharp in it. I want to play E, F sharp, G, A, B, C, D. Okay, I'm just dancing around the fingerboard playing notes in an E minor scale using these 4 slurring techniques. Now in this video I showed you these patterns based on 2 types of scales, C major and C minor. You can also apply these to the 7 modes based on the major scale, the Ionian, Dorian, Phrygian, Lydian, Mixolydian, Aeolian, and Locrian modes, as well as other minor scales too. Harmonic minor, melodic minor, pretty much any scale, symmetrical scales, like whole tone scales, So it's again just applying the technique to the notes in the particular scale you're working with. If the study of modes is new to you, if you're not aware of these, you might want to check out my playlist on modes and scales, where I have many videos on each particular mode and a summary video on all the 7 modes and things like that. But also just to mention, you already have 2 of the modes right now in this video, because the major scale is actually the Ionian mode, or the first mode of the 7 modes, and the minor scale that I showed you, the natural minor scale, is the 6th mode of the modes on the major scale, which is the Aeolian mode. So the major scale is the Ionian mode, the minor scale is the Aeolian mode. So as I said, you just have now 2 of those 7, and if you're interested to check out my videos, you can learn the other modes: Dorian, Phrygian, Lydian, Mixolydian, and Locrian. And as I said, again, you can apply these 4 legato techniques to color up your playing with all different types of scales. And again, the thing, as I said before, what really will give you access to make use, or the best use of these concepts, is to know the fingerboard. So if the fingerboard is still a bit of a mystery to you, you want to put some time into that. I did a video actually on fingerboard theory. The link will be in the description, and that will give you some insight or some quicker ways to learn the notes across the fingerboard. Because as you saw before, when I was just, as I said, dancing around the fingerboard, applying these slurring techniques, that's what you want to have to be able to play fluid across the fingerboard. Like I said, if I'm thinking of an E major chord, I just see E, the notes in the E major scale, all across the fingerboard, and then I could just, as I say, dance around from one area to another, making short leaps or making large leaps using glissandos. So check out my video on learning the fingerboard and my videos in my playlist on modes and scales, and it'll hopefully open up a lot of new ideas for you to apply these slurring techniques. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe and hit the thumbs up button, as it will help this channel to grow. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them in the comments section below, as I'd love to hear from you, your thoughts on this video. And if you have any questions that I can answer for you, please let me know. If you like progressive instrumental rock music, check out my channel, Dan Beagleman Music, where you can hear my 4 albums of all original progressive instrumental rock music. And if you're a bass player, or if you're a guitar player and bass player like myself, check out my bass channel. It's just getting underway, but there are 2 videos up there right now, and that's at Dan Beagleman Bass, and there'll be many more videos coming up there pretty quick. I'm Dan Beagleman, and those are slurring techniques applied to scales for soloing. Have a nice day.